Donald Trump's Secretary of Education just got demolished before Congress in one of the single most embarrassing moments of testimony in American history. And no, that is not an exaggeration or hyperbolic. Stay with me to find out why. Welcome to Occupied Democrats. I'm David Reddish. And happy Taco Tuesday, the day in which Donald Trump manages to embarrass himself, his voters, and the rest of America yet again. Today's little faux pas involves his Secretary of Education. You'll recall Trump had no shortage of dust-ups during his first administration when Betsy DeVos held the title of Secretary of Education and offered the world disastrous moments like these.
Public schools in Michigan gotten better?
I don't know. Overall, I can't say overall that they have all gotten better.
Well, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos appeared on 60 Minutes, unable to answer questions about schools in her own state.
Have you seen the really bad schools? Maybe try to figure out what they're doing?
I have not intentionally visited schools that are underperforming.
Maybe you should.
Maybe I should. Yes.
According to U.S. News and World Report, Michigan ranks number 36 overall in education. DeVos has championed school choice proposals, which take funds away from underperforming public schools and invest in charter and private schools.
The public schools here are doing worse than they did.
Michigan schools need to do better. There is no doubt about it.
DeVos, of course, would go on to snag this scathing parody on SNL.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming. So, Betsy, what happened with that interview?
Well, I think the problem is that the words that were coming out of my mouth were bad, and that is because they came from my brain.
Okay, well, tonight we can give you another chance. Like, what are your thoughts about, public schools versus charter schools?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't like to think of things in terms of school. That it should be up to the states. In Wyoming, for example, which has many potential grizzlies, there should be a school for bears. And in Louisiana, crocodile crossing guards. And in North Carolina, stop being trans, and that's what's best, for them.
Okay. Well, now you might now be the most protested member of Trump's cabinet. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because I do not do a good job, and I can't because I don't know how.
Okay, that's still funny. Kate McKinnon, we miss you. And maybe clear your schedule because true to form, Trump's Secretary of Education is melting down as the world watches with Schadenfreude. Linda McMahon. You'll recall her credentials. She married wrestling mogul Vince McMahon and proceeded to kiss Trump's behind, which makes her the perfect deputy for a president that thrives on ignorance. Her first act was to try and dissolve the Department of Education, which leaves me wondering exactly why she still has a job. If she doesn't have a department, shouldn't she be gone? This morning, she testified before Congress in one of the most head-scratching, jaw-dropping congressional hearings in American history. Don't believe me? Check out the highlights.
Madam Secretary, and I'm not a great mathematician, but I think you were talking about $1 trillion. I believe 1.5 billion times 10 is $15 billion. That's a little bit off from $1 trillion. But
I think the budget cuts $1.2 billion for TRIO.
Well, 1.2, that would be $12 billion, not $1 trillion.
Okay.
Fine. Why?
We are not doing something right. And your numbers are a little bit off on a number. We're going to have it's still a cut, but it's about a $4.5 billion cut, not $8 billion cut.
Well, it's a significant cut. And
to be more responsible.
To be more responsible, your responsibility amounts to just surrendering.
Sorry, sir?
Surrendering. We have this crisis in education and literacy, all these factors. What we're going to do is pull back, let the states do it.
No, we'll spend it more responsibly.
I doubt it very seriously.
Let's hope we do.
Well, hope, as someone said, is not a plan. Thank you.
Factors in making this decision. But did you worry about what your decision would do to these kids where you've ripped away their counselors and social workers literally in the middle of the program? Do you worry about what's going to happen to those kids in Northwest Connecticut and kids all across the country who have lost access to their trusted adults?
I certainly worry about mental health for children and adults all across the country. I certainly do.
I guess I'm asking specific You must have weighed this. I assume you weighed this when you made this extraordinary decision to shut down $1 billion worth of mental health programming for kids. Did you worry about what you would do to those specific kids?
Well, what we have to do, I think, and that's what our simplified funding program is going to do, is to put programs into a single grant that's going to the states to be determined how that money can be best used.
But how did you weigh the impact? I'm asking about this specific decision. How did you weigh the impact that, again, these kids in Northwest Connecticut, they literally say, this adult is the most important adult in my life. And you made a decision to shut down that program. And this can be replicated all over the country. How did you weigh the impact on those kids? It's a really cruel thing to do to those kids. So did you think about the impact on those kids?
Well, I certainly can't evaluate every particular program in every school district across the state. There are some areas that need mental health more than there are others. And there were programs in the mental health program that did deal with DEI and with gender issues, et cetera. And it wasn't just about the kind of things that you're talking about. So in totality, as we look at mental health grants across the country, we have to make sure that those programs are being used to serve best in those communities.
Yeah.
So, therefore, a governor or a principal or a state superintendent would have the best information relative to what is needed in that particular state.
Yeah, we know what we need in Northwest Connecticut, and what we need is for the federal government not to rip funding away from these kids in need in the middle of the service program.
Or to better allocate the dollars you have and provide those professionals across the state.
Well, you'll be happy to know that the Secretary of Education can't do math and struggles with literacy, or at least her vocabulary. And none of this even gets into how her budget cuts and reallocations cut mental health programs because they are woke or somehow support DEI. Look, Linda McMahon is an embarrassment, even by Trump standards, in particular to all the GOP senators that confirmed her. This woman, like so many other members of Trump's cabinet or his appointees, I'm talking about people like Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Kristi Noem, RFK Jr., and the list goes on. None of them are qualified for their jobs. But you know what's worse than that? They have no interest in doing their jobs. In the Trump era, the people in charge don't do anything. The little people do that. They just sit back and get their behinds kissed and go out and party. How else to explain why Pete Hegseth copies and pastes updates from his generals in Signal chats without adding anything himself? How else to explain why Kash Patel apparently goes to strip clubs more than his office? And how else to explain why a burned-out dishwater blonde former wrestler like Linda McMahon has no interest in educating American children so much as making sure to cut funding from their schools? These people are thieves, taking our taxpayer dollars, lining their own pockets, pushing underpaid, overworked staffers to do their jobs for them, and then doing their best to make sure nothing works in this country. Elon Musk is finally out of government. Maybe he can start a trend to get rid of all the other do-nothing Trump appointees, starting with Trump himself. This is Occupy Democrats.